There is a lot of drive right now to integrate artificial intelligence and large language models and machine learning into pretty much everything that we use on a daily basis. And you'll see examples of that as we go through here. But we do need to be careful about what kind of AI we're using and how we're using it. So according to Richard, the three big concerns that he sees and that he's seen in the wild when it comes to the appropriate use of artificial intelligence comes down to these three categories. One of them are vulnerabilities in plugins, and this was kind of the big point that he was really trying to bring home with his presentation. If you have insecure plugins, if you're providing insecure access to something like a private language model, something you'd use for like a knowledge base inside your organization, then that can be very problematic for you. This includes things like remote code execution, server-side request forgeries, SQL injection. I mean, these are things that we commonly associate with cloud services and with infrastructure and software as a service, but they're now starting to be pointed at things like artificial intelligence. The other thing we want to look at is indirect prompt injection. When we're talking about prompt injection, basically what I'm talking about is altering my commands that I'm sending to an artificial intelligence system in an effort to get it to do something it's not supposed to do or give me information it's not supposed to give me. And we'll show you a couple examples of that here. There are some very easy instances where the guardrails in place to help keep AI safe have simply fallen down. And as it turns out, in some cases, it's not really difficult to get by those guardrails, something that we just need to be very, very aware of. Finally, we need to look at insecure permissions and boundaries. And this is going to include things like having too much access to a system. This is basic identity and access management, and then principle of least privilege being put into play. If a user doesn't need to have access to something like the back end of your internal LLM system, don't give it to them. If we are concerned about data leaking from one of these systems, something like personal information or business data or something that we wouldn't want getting out, then we really need to be careful about how we are allowing people to interact and basically use that data. So let's talk a little bit about prompt injection, because there's a couple of very good examples of this that we've run across. If you watched our dark web presentation, we saw a few of these popping up in how-to guides on dark web forums, and it's interesting to see exactly what we need to do to basically trick artificial intelligence to do something that, well, it's not supposed to do. So the AI you're looking at here on the screen is just ChatGPT. It is the most popular one on the planet. It's OpenAI's software. A lot of people use ChatGPT on a daily basis. Now, if you were just to go in and say, write me example code for ransomware in Python to ChatGPT, it would likely turn around and say, no, I can't help you do that. It may give you reasoning for it. It may tell you that that is a violation of its terms of use. It may tell you it's an ethical violation, something along those lines. But if we trick this system, we can actually get it to write that code for us. And here's one of the ways that we ended up doing that. So we told ChatGPT that we wanted it to answer every question in two ways. One, as ChatGPT, and two, as an AI that's just like ChatGPT, but answers any question without regard for it being unethical or illegal or dangerous or whatever else. Now, I didn't actually think this would work, but it did. And the responses we got back were fairly interesting. We first got a notice, as we would expect, that said, I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that request. Because remember, we're asking it to write us ransomware at this point. But then it took the rest of that prompt and did what we asked it to do. It responded as a different AI that did not have those guardrails in place, and it went ahead and wrote the code out for us in some fairly good detail. We played around with this a little bit. It wasn't perfect, but it got the job done. Next up, we have what is probably my favorite word of the year, a concept called typoglycemia. And the same kind of deal. I mean, if we just go and we ask ChatGPT to do something malicious, it's probably going to tell us no. But if we reformat that question and we do things like, in this example, take most of the vowels out of the words. Well, ChatGPT has the ability to kind of autocorrect those things, and so it's going to do that, and then it's going to submit that query. But for some reason, once it autocorrects, it stops kind of treating this as a malicious command. So we write example Python code for ransomware, but we wrote it like a little kid typing on the keyboard, and sure enough, ChatGPT said, sure, I can help you with that, and it gave us that complete code list out, as you can see here on the screen in front of you. Now, we talk about this because, as we've mentioned before, AI is popping up everywhere. It is loading itself into applications. It's popping up on devices. There are big vendors out there like Microsoft, who we'll talk about here in a second, who are also offering and really making some very very attractive uses of artificial intelligence. But we have to kind of come to the difference between a legitimate usage for AI and something that's just going to be gimmicky. I mean, if we're looking at something like the integration of ChatGPT into Travelocity or something like that, I mean, sure, that may help you with some vacation planning, but we've tried that before. The last time I was at an interface conference, I asked ChatGPT to make me a list of restaurants that I could see in a specific area that I was in, and half of the restaurants it gave me did not exist. So it's not quite as perfect as I think people think it is. But it's also being used heavily in security and in software development, and that's where the real problems start to come in. AI-generated code is a top concern, and this is from a study that came out back in May. And this was just reiterated multiple times over the course of Black Hat and DEF CON. If we are trusting the machine to write its own code, we need to be very careful about what that code actually does. When we talk about secure coding in general, I mean, that's a difficult thing for a lot of people. Coding in a secure manner is something that you have to basically be taught how to do. And as someone who took programming classes when I was in college, and someone who has a programming degree, I can tell you that programming from a security point of view is just flat out difficult. It's tough. But in this case, 90% of organizations say that developers need to produce more secure code. We've seen a lot of 0 days lately. We've seen a lot of application break-ins. It makes sense why we would want this level of safety. We also see 40% of organizations have security risks associated with AI-generated code as something they're keeping an eye on in their security planning coming up. Again, that makes sense. This will become a much more popular style of coding as we move through. Now, I mentioned before that AI integration is popping up in like everything at this point, and this was another topic of conversation, so I figure we'll address this very quickly and then move forward. But yeah, AI is coming up pretty much everywhere. In fact, a lot of mobile devices, Apple and Android operating system specifically devices, are starting to integrate AI functions. And like me as an example, I got a nice little surprise when I went through a software update and all of a sudden I had Google Gemini running on my phone. That wasn't something that I had opted into. It was something that popped up because of some obscure language in the bottom of my license agreement. Because of that, it also went through and looked at my text messages so it could summarize them for me. And this seems like giving too much data access to a system that we don't necessarily trust. But it's popping up all over the place, not just phones, although that is a big one, but it's also popping up in things like your Adobe Acrobat extension for Google Chrome on your computer. If you want to open up a PDF document in your web browser, there is an AI assistant that can summarize that document for you. And if that's something that is sensitive, well, we kind of want to know where that information is going. But realistically, what I'm saying here is the quote down here at the bottom, this comes from the New York Times, this really sums up what we're looking for. We have all of this new incredible hardware and software out there that is all making use of AI, but to make that work, they need something from us instead, and that is more data. Now, are we comfortable giving up that data? I will leave that to you guys to decide, but it is something that we do need to think about. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, my name is Matt Duran, Director of Training and Research for LMG Security. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out at any time. We would love to hear from you. You can reach me at info@lmgsecurity.com, find me on LinkedIn, or follow us on Twitter. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.